Let's talk about the Mini and Max brushes from Rephr. So these are originally based on their 1, 2, 13, 14, 15 brushes, but they decided to make Mini smaller versions and Max larger versions of them. So I'm going to be showing you how these look compared to my eye, as I always do in brush review videos, and then I'm going to show you a demo on each eye with each of the sets, so you can get an idea on just how these work, what kind of look you can get with them, and why you would want to buy a Max over a Mini, vice versa, or if you just want to stick to the originals. I did purchase the sets myself, but I do have an affiliate link which I will put down in the description box in case you're interested. Definitely recommend waiting for a sale. They do run sales, I would say, every few months, and they're really great sales. During the last sale, I did buy another set of the Minis because I have been really thoroughly enjoying them, and I always want to make sure that I really try the brushes out before I give you some of my thoughts. If you've been on my channel or you've seen my previous Rephr video where I talked about all of their eye brushes and again showed you each of the brushes next to my eye and also a demo, you know I love their 13 and 14 brushes with my whole heart. I have probably, I want to say, at least 5 of each of the brushes, and I just cannot get enough. I kind of buy them every time there's a sale because I love the shape of them. I love the quality of them. They really fit with my preference of how I like to apply eyeshadow. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that everyone has different brushes that they prefer because they're comfortable using them. They know the kind of blend they're gonna get. They know what kind of look they're going for. And usually the looks I'm going for are definitely more controlled kind of looks, though I do definitely like to blow out the outer crease for sure, but I like to have control. I think that's #1 thing for me, and I'm extremely picky when it comes to eye brushes, is I want to have control. I want to be able to focus it in one area and then be able to blend it out as far as I want and not immediately have it blended out. I do have smaller hooded lids, and ever since I first discovered smaller eye brushes, which I believe the first time I did, I think I bought the Wayne Goss brushes and then some Hakuhodo brushes that were smaller, and that really changed the game for me and the way I have been applying eyeshadow. I do have other smaller brushes that are from other brands, but none of them are the same shape and size of the 13 and 14. So I was very excited to see the Mini versions. I don't think that they're becoming permanent yet, but I'm really crossing my fingers that they do become permanent. Now, the Max brushes, definitely a bit on the larger side, and you'll see that, and I'll talk about that as I'm using them. So I personally prefer the smaller the better, really. Also, something that's very important to keep in mind is when you get the brush, it is brand new, it was just created, so the shape of it will kind of change a little bit. It will usually fluff out a little bit as you wash it. So I want to show you some just comparison pictures of like a brand new version of the brush versus a brush that has been washed. Unfortunately, I do not have a brand new version of the Max brushes since I did not repurchase those, but with those, keep in mind that you're going to definitely get them to fluff out even more, so they will be even bigger. But let's get into showing you each of the brushes next to my eye, and I'll just give you some more of my thoughts at the end of the video. So first I'm going to be showcasing the Minis, and then on the other eye I'll use the Max. So first I'm going to use the 15 Mini, which is the biggest brush out of all the, it's the fluffiest. It has a dome shape, so you're predominantly going to get the most distribution right here on the tip of it. So I'm going to be just using random shadows, and I'm just gonna, I'm so used to saying what I'm using that it feels weird not to say what I'm using. But this is going to essentially give you a really quick all over wash blend in the crease. But it's also going to be a little bit more focused, but not as focused as the other brushes in here. I'm just going to go in with a little bit more. And just using a really light hand. I usually hold my brush all the way at the end of the brush. So then the next brush shape is the 01 Mini. So this kind of brush shape, personally, I don't use a lot. I've never really gravitated towards this kind of brush shape. So it's a little harder for me to show you how to use it because I really wouldn't use it much. I've had this kind of brush so many times from other brands. You could definitely use this for shimmers because it has a little bit of floof to it. Is it going to give you the most precision in applying a shimmer? No, but it will pick up a shimmer really nicely. But I'm going to show you how I would use it if I was to use it a lot. I'm just taking a little bit darker shade because this is a little bit flatter. You could just build depth in your crease with this, and you could just really get in the socket this way. And then you can turn it on its side this way and just sweep it and blend it out further. So this will give you really specific placement just in here, and then this will blend it out. So it's a really great kind of multi-use brush, but like I mentioned, I just prefer to use smaller brushes than this that are just more like blending brushes, but I do sometimes use them, but not very often. So moving on to these three shapes, you could definitely use this one to apply shimmer. You could use this one like this underneath the lower lash line. You could use it eyeshadow wing. You could use it to add depth to a cut crease, or just in here, add a little bit more focus. And then the blending brushes, so these are the ones that I have already washed. So they do have a little bit of extra volume than when you first receive them. And as you can see, this one is definitely longer. And so this one has a little bit more flexibility to it rather than this one, which is shorter and squatter, so there's less resistance. This one being more pointed, I do really like to use this brush to add depth to an outer corner because it is so tiny. It really just lays it down right in here really nicely. And then you could still use it to blend out if you wanted to, but I do usually use a slightly bigger brush. So usually I would use the non-mini version of the 13 brush actually to blend out a little bit, but by all means you could definitely use it to blend. I think a lot of these brushes, there are multiple ways you can use them in an eye look. So I mean, look at that, that was so easy, and just a little bit of an addition of depth in there. And then you could also use it underneath the lower lash line, but you do run the risk of it just going down a little bit further than you might want. So the 02 Mini is perfect because it will only lay down the product if you pick it up on the edge of it on the very tip. So there you have it. So I have a really close application to my lash line, and then I could use this brush and smoke it out a bit for sure. But you could also use this brush for that as well. Again, this one is a little bit stiffer. If you feel like some eyeshadow was stuck down, I think this one will get you a lot further than this one. It is fluffier. It is a little bit loosey-goosey. So it will just kind of really blow something out versus this one. But you could definitely use this one on the outer corner as well, and then swoop it underneath the lower lash line. I definitely do that with this brush a lot. But again, keeping in mind that if you bring this underneath the lower lash line, it will have a bit more of an area that it covers because it is not as pointed as the other brush, and it is also a little bit stiffer. So I'm just gonna take a little bit more of this dark brown and I'm gonna bring it into the crease. You can see just how very strategically that got placed in here, and then I can use it to just blend upwards and really create a beautiful gradient with the blend. And then I'm gonna use this brush and I'm gonna apply shimmer on the lid. So I'm gonna use this lighter shimmer, and this is going to give you a great little edge on applying it right in here if you wanted to. And obviously on the lid, you're gonna not cover as much area as another flatter brush, but it works for it just as well if you wanted something multitasking. I'm just gonna go back in with a little bit in here. And then I wiped off the 15 Mini, and I'm gonna go in with a little bit of my setting powder, and I'm just gonna take that on the very edges of everything. So you could also use this one. I usually like to use fluffier, bigger brushes for this purpose to really just help blow everything out even more. And then I'm gonna go back in with just a little bit of that peachy shade I had earlier. And so at this angle, it gives me more precision this way. And then this way, it gives me a blend like this versus like this. So moving on to the side, I'm going to be using the Max brushes, which I mentioned. Definitely prefer the smaller brushes, just personally, the way I like to apply eyeshadow. I do think the 13 Max is probably my favorite one out of this bunch because it is larger and fluffier. I think it serves more of a purpose for me because it does cover a larger area. It is also a little bit on the stiff side, but then for example the 15 Max, like this is something I would never apply eyeshadow with. It is just not something I do. I don't really sweep a lot. I tend to kind of go in my crease, build in my crease, and then put a shimmer on top. But definitely if you were just like a 2 eyeshadow kind of person and you just wanted to kind of cover a really big area, you could for sure do that. So for the crease, I'm gonna use the 13 Max and I'm gonna basically recreate the look, but I'm going to be using these brushes. So I'm just popping that into the crease, and you can already see like that's already starting to bring it it's just covering a wider area. It is also flatter on top, so that is the biggest difference in general of the 13 and 14 brush. One is tapered and one is flat. So this is a great just kind of like overall blend. But personally, I like to be just a little bit more strategic in the placement. So I'm going to use the 14 Max and we're going to add a little bit of depth. So the way that it picked up was really over here, right in the center. And all the bristles that are shorter around it did not get any pigment. So now I'm just going to go back in with this brush. And I'm definitely getting it in the crease right there. But it's also blending at the same time. So you just have less control essentially. But if you really like a blown out, super blown out look, then bigger brushes are definitely the way to go. So I'm just adding that in. And I feel like I wasn't really able to get a good blend in here. And I can definitely use this brush to blend it upwards a bit more. However, it's going to cover a larger area again, so it's going to spread it further up. So I'm just going to be spreading this up, and my eyeshadow is going to basically end up being like right underneath my brow, which usually don't like for me personally. So I just blended that out. So those are the two brushes. And then the 01 Max, similarly to the 01 Mini, you can see they have the same essential shape. So they are a little bit flatter and then a little bit wider. And then they have that little floof kind of coming up, so they're tapered and then they kind of floof out a little bit. So this one for me, again, this literally covers my entire lid, so I can use this. And let me just cover. I can do this just to show you how much of spread this has, right? And then I can't really use that. I mean, I can try to use it to blend out sideways because I'm trying to create more of a blend out here without it going necessarily up here. So if I turn it on its side, it's going to create a blend up here as well. So controlled, not controlled. Really blended though. That's for sure. I mean, Rephr brushes are super good at blending. So in this scenario, if I only had these brushes, I would probably go back in again with the 13 Max and add a little bit of depth. I'm going to go in with just the tip of this one and just pack on a little bit more out here. But again, I would want to reach for another brush. So I'm going in with the 14 Max and I'm just going to use that to blend that out. And the other thing is now, because this is so blended out because it was a really large area, I can go in with the lighter peach, but it's not going to really give me the space to add it in because it is so blown out, which obviously maybe you didn't want to add another shade on the outer portion, which is totally fine. And then as for the 15 Max, this is really a brush I would just use for the edges. So again, really great, super fluffy brush. Just put on a little setting powder that is your skin tone and just go over the edges. I'm just gonna go back in with a little bit more soot. I feel like it kind of stuck down a little bit. And I did prime with the Pat McGrath primer. And then for the lower lash line, I can't use this. It's going to smoke it out a little too far for my eye shape. And then I could use this, but let me just show you how far down this is going to go. So I can use that if I really want to smoke it out down here. I would preferably use the 02 Max for this because it does give me just a little bit more control to go right here, but it would spread it further than if I had used the 02 Mini for sure. So you can already see the difference and how much further down it is than on this eye. So it's really dependent a lot on what kind of eyeshadow looks you like to use, how you like to build your eyeshadow, and what are you trying to achieve. And I'm going to use the 02 Max, and I'm going to essentially do what I did on the other eye. So I'm going to use a lighter shimmer up here, and that is going to spread it. My hand slipped a little bit, but it's going to spread it a bit farther. But it is a good thing because this way, look at how much coverage this has when I'm using it with the flat side. So it has that height, and I can cover a bigger area. So here's the same look, but using the Mini and the Max. They both look really nice and blended, but obviously you could see just everything is more like tighter here versus here, which For sure, I do this all the time. I can do this with these brushes as well, but I like to have the option to if I want to or not. While with the Max brushes, you're gonna go there regardless. Like you cannot control, you're gonna want a blown out eye. So it depends, do you prefer to create looks like this? Or do you prefer to create looks like this? Or does it depend on the occasion? So first I'm going to talk about the Max brushes. I think my favorite one out of the Max is the 13 Max. I do really like that it is flat at the top, and I like that it's a larger version of it. However, I think the rest of them are just a little bit too large for my liking, especially the 15 Max. I mean, this is a chunky boy. Like, this is pretty big. I would not really use this much except for to further blend the edges of my eyeshadow, and I'm probably going to designate this as a highlighter brush, which is what I usually do with blending brushes that are a little too large for me. And even the 14 Max, I don't know, I think I prefer this one because this one I can see myself using it to really blow out the edge, versus this one it is a little bit more pointy, so I feel like I'm just not really, if I want a pointy brush, I'd rather use some of these smaller versions of a pointy brush and not this one. As for the 01 Max, this one is a big one. Again, if you like to just put one mat down all over the lid, then this one is for you. It will cover large area, it will pick up pigment very nicely, but not really something for me, especially because it is that flat on one side and then wide on the other side, and it does taper just a little bit. Just not really a brush shape that I gravitate towards. I will use it, but it's not like my favorite time, if that makes sense. And then the 02 Max, I think this is a nice brush for applying shimmers for sure, or the lower lash line. You can definitely create some beautiful, more blown out looks on the outer corner. But personally, like I said in the beginning, I just prefer the minis. So onto the minis, 13 mini and 14 mini, absolutely love. These two have become my favorite outer corner brushes, so I like to use these to really lay down the pigment. So I feel like you need both necessarily. No, I think it's going to come down to preference. I like having both. The more smaller brushes, the better. The 02 brush, love this one, nice and small. Again, you can create some eyeshadows with it. You can use it underneath the lower lash line. It's a great little smaller brush. You can also definitely use it to apply shimmer. So great kind of workhorse brush. And then the 01 mini, not really a shape that I gravitate towards a lot. I like it, but not really like a huge favorite, and definitely not a must. And then the 15 mini, I do enjoy this one. It reminds me of a brush I have from Hakuhodo, I believe. I think this is a nice in-between brush. So here is the original. This one has the way older brush handle, which I actually prefer. I really wish these were tapered on the end. This is just a general comment for these, partially because these do take up more space when you have them all together, and I just think that it's just nicer for holding when it's tapered at the end. But I digress. So here's the original 15, here's the Max 15, and here's the 15 mini. I think it's a really nice in-between size, definitely a bit on the fluffier side, so you will really get a great blend. But this one I would use for when I want a little less precision, but it does have that taper to it, so you can get into the crease with this one for sure. So those are my thoughts on the mini and Max brushes. Let me know in the comments below if you've tried any of them and what you think of them, how you like to use them. People use a brush in different ways and the way that it makes sense for them, and I think that's always super interesting because there's definitely times I've seen a brush used in a way that I never thought of, and I tried using it that way and it really worked for me, and also like vice versa. So sometimes it might not work for you, so it's always really fun to just experiment with brush shapes and using them to apply eyeshadow different ways and seeing which outcome you prefer on yourself. So that's everything for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.